Hey, this is Todd. Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with our district attorney, Robert Turner Jr., and have a lengthy conversation with him about a number of issues that are important to our area, to the Black Belt in general, the 4th Judicial District more specifically, and even more specifically, Dallas County and the Selma area. I've divided the hour and 15-minute long interview into segments so that it'll be easier to watch. This is segment 5 of the interview with Robert Turner Jr. I hope you find it interesting and informative. And thanks for watching Selma Sun and Black Belt News Network.
Almost appears that in some places, and this is an opinion,
Right.
but there are some places that have shown just as soon as we don't have to comply with what was put on us before, we are not going to do it.
I can see that. I can understand.
So I understand you.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I agree to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the lunch and the breakfast and lunch programs in the public schools, the federal government is involved in that. But earlier in our conversation, even today, one of the things that you mentioned was there are a lot of kids that don't get 3 squares.
Right.
That program was instituted because there was a recognition that students generally perform better if they've eaten.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's a known fact. And so what was happening is, I just think that there needs to be more money allocated to that public school system.
Mm-hmm.
It helps a lot of folk out.
yeah, and of course, this goes back to the crime. It's all part of the crime you're talking
Right.
about, because a better educated society and more people who are, for lack of a better term, thinking right, thinking straight,
And
are less likely to
extracurriculars, like
commit
a
crime
lot
and more
of-
likely to get jobs when they're available and be trained
right.
for the jobs that are available.
So a lot of public schools have had to skim their program offerings because there just isn't money to attract art teachers,
Yeah.
choir,
And music.
teachers.
I'm all into the music too, so I think that's a very important part of it.
and we had,
that's very true.
and I'm not an old guy. I don't view myself as an old guy. My hairline's not what it used to be.
Yeah, I see it.
Got
Me either.
Got some pepper in my beard now.
Hey,
But in the 90s, when I was in school, we had a school choir.
in the 90s when you were in school?
We had music teachers. We had
Well, back in the late 70s and early 80s when I was in school,
Yeah.
we had the same thing.
And you probably
I was in band.
Listen, you
I was
probably
in choir.
had more
Yeah. Because as it got towards the 90s, they were cutting it more. And by
because
the
there
2000s,
were more people of all
yeah,
races in public schools, and
and more people in public school.
and more people in public schools.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't that much of an outcry from the taxpayers about why is all of my money going into this school, because your kids were going there and you didn't have a problem with
Right.
it. But at some point in time, people said, well, my kids aren't going to that school anymore because I don't want my kids going to school with an element.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what happens is when
My wife and I were just talking about that
private
this morning.
schools cost a little
But that's
bit
a
more.
problem.
It's expensive to send your
Yeah.
kids to private school. So if I was sending my kids to a private school, I wouldn't want to have to pay that and then have my taxes
No
go to
taxes,
support
yeah.
the public that I don't have any use for anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to sit back and say, I don't think that has any effect on what's happening in the streets, that's us really
Yeah. And,
Not
and it
being
does. It
realistic.
has a lot to do with what's happening on the street,
Exactly.
because not only do these private schools tend to be very segregated, regardless of, oh yeah, we got black folks at this school. We got white. No, not
and it's
not like the real.
and it's selective.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. But that is perpetuating the same hate and the same divisions that we're trying to get over, so that we don't have this animosity that leads to problems in the street.
That's
And
right.
even if it's white on white, black on black, and not black on white, you still have these emotions and feelings, and you still have these mindsets that are not being squelched at an early age, and it is the reason why we had a young teen shot just a couple
And
Wednesdays
then there's
ago.
the lack of extracurriculars.
Lack
There
of
are
exact.
so
Yeah.
many. Like now, I was at a high school football game last Friday. Francis Marion played Dallas County.
Yeah.
Neither of the schools had a marching band.
See, that just kills me. 'Cause that's my thing, man.
So
marching
when I
band.
was in school, I told you about that.
yeah.
I gave you a time frame.
Yeah.
But even at Francis Marion, we were a 3A school at that time, and I wasn't in the band, but our band marched over 100 kids.
Golly, that was I remember Francis Marion having a big band.
And 100 kids.
Because I remember seeing him at some band
In
competitions.
addition to a good football team, a good basketball team, 100 kids who didn't have to go home at 2:45.
Right.
But they stayed around and practiced until about 4:45 or 5 or 6 o'clock.
So even if Mama did have to work and wasn't there when they got home, they were less
were a
time they
part
were
of
home before Mama got
colleges
home.
give scholarships
Yeah.
for band.
Golly, that's
Think
a good
about
idea.
over the past 5 to 10 years as we see these small bands. Some of our cheerleading squads now are bigger than the bands.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons behind that is if the school systems can't have only so many teacher units to allot. In the same state that is against giving more funding to the public schools, constantly raise the academic requirements of the public schools to the point where they have to do far more and comply with far more standards, like this new thing about the third graders having to read on a certain level. Private schools don't have that same requirement. So while you're decreasing funding, you're increasing what standards teachers have to meet, right?
Yeah.
So when a superintendent is faced with a budget crisis, and he's like, am I gonna hire a band director or am I gonna hire somebody that can teach English? If that English teacher can't help out and also know a little bit something about band.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I've only got so many teaching units.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing happening throughout the country.
And that's
that's
spilling
a
over.
divide. And we don't want to have that conversation when we're having a conversation about crime.
But we need to.
But you need to.
You have to.
Let's
it's the
see.
same
And if we
monster.
get everybody in the same room and people will listen instead of shouting one another down and screaming and going to
And like you alluded to earlier, playing the blame game.
Yeah.
This is what I tell my kids all the time. I don't care whose fault it is. You may not have busted that bag of garbage, but it's on the ground. Pick it up and clean it up.
That's it.
You may not have done it. And whoever did it, if I find out, I'll deal with them. But right now, let's deal with the problem at hand, fix it, and then move on.
That's right.
So we don't have that problem anymore.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter
we've
who's
gotta
caused
have-
the problem. Let's fix the problem.
And we've got to have some buy-in. and
That's another
some
thing, is getting
problem
people to say,
solving,
oh,
because
okay, you know
cities-
what?
And I'm not the mayor.
Yeah.
I'm not the probate judge, right? But the average citizen needs to know that in order for your water, your utilities to function properly, and your water bills to remain low, in order for you to have enough police officers on the street to patrol, then the city has to have a tax base and revenue that's flowing in. You can't expect a police department to run off of tickets, citations, and misdemeanors that are committed.
Right.
If businesses are, if I'm living in Selma, no, if my office or my building is in Selma, but I'm living in Prattville, and your house in Prattville is a $420,000 house, those taxes are going to make the Prattville Lions, or the Otagoville Eagles, or the Billingsley Bears. That's going to help them out. That's not going to do anything for Dallas County. The majority of our teachers live out of county.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And it's one thing that we have to understand, that until we recognize how core governmental units receive their funding, we're always going to be running behind the wheel. We're not going to be able to keep pace and be progressive. You're not going to be able, I think Selma Police Department is understaffed by a lot of officers.
And there's a shortage of officers around the country.
It is, but there's a reason.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised at how many. I was talking to an officer in one of the adjacent counties that works for one of the cities. Police officers are out there now dealing with people who have ammunition that is far superior to what their standard issue is, right?
Yeah.
Making $15 an hour.
Yeah. So why would you want to be, again, go back when why would you be a cop if you're going to do that?
Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Because, again, that's that big C word. I love it. It's capitalistic. But when people start looking at cars, houses, lifestyles, upward mobility, doing what's best for their children or what have you, why go into police work?
Right. So you need to make...
And then you can go into police work, but you just won't do it in a place that's paying you $15 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
You will be from here, born and raised, wanting to be a police officer. But then when you realize how much stuff costs these days, you'll end up in a jurisdiction or a city where you can make the kind of money that you need to maintain a safe lifestyle.
And I think what you've alluded to, and it makes so much sense, is that one of the best ways to fight the crime problem and to make these situations more equitable or even is to go back to education. And again, you got to change the mindset, because people have too much of a negative mindset, especially in Dallas County and around here. We got to change the mindset. It's not going to be an easy thing to do, but education and job opportunities, which from what I understand, there's jobs out there, but again, a lot of people aren't trained for them.
Right.
Which goes back to education. That's going to be kind of the foundation for the whole thing.
Even the ones that are trained for it, what's the wage?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're making a fair enough wage. But then, if we can get enough people educated where they are quote worth the higher wage because of their training, then they could get more wages. We could demand that the companies, you want me to work for you because, and then I deserve this much. Boy, here's what the standard is. But it all goes back to education.
Right.
And a lot of it does start at home, but I think too we need to educate the parents.
Right.
Because there's a generation or two of parents who have missed out some, and they're passing on bad habits to the kids. So there's got to be enough programming and organizations that will, and I know we have a bunch here, but we may need more, maybe need different ones to identify and to target the parents of the kids who are also problem, and make sure that the parents aren't a problem, so that the kids won't be a problem. And I mean that seems like to me that it's a big job, but it's got to be done, or else
that's right.
We're going to continue on the path we're on right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I don't, we can sit here and I don't know, how this conversation will be viewed. I don't know whether you and I are coming across as complainers. I don't think we're.
No, I don't think so. It's just throwing out ideas and trying to.
We say all of that because there are some specific issues that we are, we're talking about crime, violent crime, and increasing crime amongst juveniles. It's not as prevalent as fear-mongers would want it to appear.
I understand.
But it's still an issue.
Right.
And it's too much of it going on here. And I believe that if a community takes a strong stance and say, we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior, and we are going to collectively address it, I think that we can, stop that insurrection or that sudden surge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if we get together and talk about it and educate the community on the importance of reporting things that are abnormal and that are illegal.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to create sensible laws that are easy to follow and to enforce. Like even in Alabama, as conservative as it is, and as pro-gun rights as this state is, when the legislature abolished the pistol permit requirement, they did that over the objection of the Alabama District Attorneys Association, the objection of the Alabama Sheriff's Association. There was not one single law enforcement entity that was in support of that. Yep. And it wasn't because of financial reasons, because it's not like counties were getting rich off of pistol permit requirements. Even though it did help a lot of them, it was because
paper trail.
Not a paper trail, but the other things that the opposition was because of the fact that we viewed that as a public safety threat. And the numbers are bearing it out.
We're going to have a conversation about that soon. We're going to call that it. I want to thank you so much for sitting with me today. I could sit here the rest of the afternoon and listen to you and talk to you, but I know neither one of us have that kind of time.
That's right.
But we do need to talk further and maybe come up with some more ideas in the future and maybe do this again. And especially I do want to talk with you, and I'm going to get with Sheriff Grantham, because we did an interview right before the open carry became.
Okay.
And so now, a year later, I want to sit down with him and see what he's discovered, and I would love to do the same with you, maybe towards in another month or two. So.
Okay, good deal.
But thank you so much for spending time with me today, and we'll be talking again soon.
All right, and I apologize for not being dressed for the occasion.
No worries.